The bitter winter wind howled across the plains of the Nebraska Territory, carrying with it the promises of death for Olivia Kensington as she lay broken and bloodied in the deepening snow. Her last coherent thought before darkness claimed her was that 23 years of life seemed so terribly short, especially when one died alone. Xavier Prescott pulled his coat tighter around his lean frame as he urged his exhausted horse through the blizzard. The 28-year-old cowboy had been riding for Council Bluffs, Iowa, when the storm hit, forcing him to seek shelter. Now, as 1868 threatened to become his final year on Earth, he squinted through the curtain of white, praying for any sign of salvation. That's when he saw her, a dark smudge against the pristine snow. "Whoa there, Samson," Xavier called, reining in his mount. The horse snorted, hot breath billowing in the frigid air as Xavier dismounted and cautiously approached the figure. His heart hammered when he realized it was a woman, her face bruised, lips split, golden hair matted with blood against the snow. "Miss, can you hear me?" he asked, kneeling beside her. No response. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, faint and erratic, but present. "Lord Almighty," Xavier whispered, quickly removing his coat and wrapping it around her still form. She was alive, but barely. If he didn't get her warm soon, she wouldn't survive the night. With careful movements, Xavier lifted the woman onto Samson, then mounted behind her, cradling her limp body against his chest. "Hang on, miss," he murmured into her ear, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Just hang on." Xavier had spotted an abandoned homestead about a mile back. It wasn't much, but it would provide shelter from the howling storm. He turned Samson around, praying they'd make it in time. The one-room cabin was little more than 4 walls and a roof, but it was standing, and that was all that mattered. Xavier kicked the door open, carried the unconscious woman inside, and laid her gently on the dusty floor while he worked. He started a fire in the small stone hearth, grateful to find dry kindling stacked beside it. Once the flames were crackling, he returned to the woman's side. Her skin was blue-tinged, her breathing shallow. Xavier knew the dangers of frostbite and hypothermia all too well. He'd seen good men lose fingers, toes, even their lives to the merciless cold. "I apologize for the impropriety, miss," he said as he began to remove her wet clothing, "but I can't let you freeze to death." Xavier worked methodically, stripping away the sodden layers and replacing them with his spare shirt and blankets from his saddlebag. He examined her injuries as he went. Bruises covered her arms and torso, her right eye was swollen shut, and a nasty gash ran along her hairline. Someone had done this to her. Someone had beaten her and left her to die in the snow. The thought kindled a rage in Xavier's chest, but he pushed it aside. There would be time for anger later. Right now, this woman needed warmth and care. He draped his bedroll over her and built up the fire until the small cabin grew warm. Then Xavier gently lifted the woman and placed her closer to the hearth, making sure she was secure before tending to Samson. After removing the saddle and rubbing down his loyal horse, Xavier returned to find the woman shivering violently. It was a good sign her body was fighting to warm itself, but she needed more heat. With a heavy sigh, Xavier slid beneath the blankets next to her, pulling her against his chest. "I swear I'm not taking liberties, miss," he whispered, "but body heat's the fastest way to warm you." Throughout the night, Xavier kept vigil, periodically checking her pulse and breathing. He bathed her bruised face with melted snow, cleaning away the dried blood as best he could. When dawn finally broke, pale light filtering through the cabin's single window, the woman stirred. A soft moan escaped her lips as consciousness returned. She tensed immediately, sensing someone beside her. "Easy now," Xavier said, sitting up and moving away to give her space. "You're safe." I found you in the snow." Her eyes, one emerald green, the other still swollen shut, darted around the unfamiliar surroundings before landing on Xavier. Fear flashed across her face. "Who are you?" she rasped, her voice barely audible. "Xavier Prescott, miss. I was traveling to Council Bluffs when the storm hit. Found you half frozen about 5 miles west of here." She tried to sit up but winced, clutching her ribs. "Best not move too much," Xavier advised. "You've taken quite a beating." Tears welled in her good eye. "They took everything." "Who did?" "Who hurt you?" She looked away. "Men from the cattle drive passing through. I was working at the saloon in Millard Station. Her voice broke. They didn't like that I refused their advances." Xavier's jaw tightened. "You're safe now, I give you my word." "Olivia," she whispered after a moment. "Olivia Kensington, Miss Kensington," Xavier nodded. "How about some food? I've got jerky and hardtack, not much of a breakfast, but it'll keep your strength up." While Olivia ate small bites of the offered food, Xavier checked outside. The storm had subsided, leaving a pristine blanket of snow as far as the eye could see. The temperature was rising, but traveling would still be dangerous, especially for someone in Olivia's condition. "We'll need to stay here another day at least," Xavier announced, returning to the cabin. "Give you time to regain some strength." Olivia nodded silently, her good eye fixed on the dancing flames in the hearth. "Those men," Xavier said carefully, "do you think they'll come looking for you?" "No," she replied, her voice hollow. "They think I'm dead. That was their intention." Xavier studied her face, even bruised and swollen. He could see she was beautiful, with delicate features and a strength that shone through her pain. Something in his chest tightened. He'd never been one to believe in fate, but finding her in that snowstorm seemed like more than mere coincidence. "Well, you proved them wrong by surviving the night," he said with a gentle smile. "And I aim to see you safe to Council Bluffs if that's where you'd like to go." "Why would you help me?" Olivia asked, suspicion evident in her voice. "You don't know me." "My pa raised me to believe that a man's character is defined by what he does when no one's watching," Xavier replied simply. "I couldn't leave you to die, Miss Kensington. Wouldn't be right." Olivia studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Thank you, Mr. Prescott." "Xavier, please." "Xavier," she echoed softly. As the day progressed, Olivia drifted in and out of sleep while Xavier tended the fire and cared for Samson. He hunted successfully in the afternoon, returning with a rabbit that he skinned and cooked over the fire. The hot meal brought some color back to Olivia's cheeks. "Tell me about Council Bluffs," she said as they ate. "Why were you heading there?" Xavier wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "I've got family there, my mother's sister and her husband. They wrote that they could use some help with their farm. My last job ended when the ranch I was working for sold off their herd." "You're a cowboy then?" "Have been since I was 16, Xavier confirmed. "Started as a wrangler, worked my way up to trail boss on a few drives." "I've never been to Council Bluffs," Olivia admitted. "Is it nice? Decent enough town from what I recall. Growing fast since the railroad came through, plenty of opportunity for honest work." He paused, then added, "For both of us, I'd wager." Olivia's expression clouded. "I don't know if any respectable establishment would hire me now. Working in a saloon, it follows a woman." "My aunt runs a dress shop," Xavier offered. "She might be able to help." Hope flickered briefly in Olivia's eyes before doubt extinguished it. "Why would you do that for me?" "You've already saved my life." Xavier considered her question carefully. "Sometimes life gives us chances to do good. I figure this is one of those times." That night, Xavier insisted on sleeping near the door while Olivia took the space closest to the fire. Despite her protests that he'd already given up his coat and blanket, he was adamant. "I've slept under worse conditions, Miss Kensington. You need the warmth more than I do." As moonlight filtered through the cabin window, Olivia studied the cowboy's profile. He was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. But more than his appearance, it was his quiet dignity that impressed her, the way he'd preserved her modesty while saving her life, his respectful distance now that she was conscious. Men like Xavier Prescott were rare in Olivia's experience. Growing up in an orphanage in St. Louis, she'd learned early that most men saw her as either a burden or an object. When she'd aged out of the orphanage at 18, the only work she could find was serving drinks in saloons, which only reinforced that lesson. The next morning brought clearer skies and milder temperatures. Xavier declared it safe to travel if they took it slow. "Are you certain you're strong enough?" he asked Olivia as he helped her to her feet. She winced but nodded determinedly. "I can manage." Xavier fashioned a more comfortable seat on Samson, using his bedroll and spare blanket to create a cushioned space in front of the saddle where Olivia could sit without putting pressure on her injured ribs. He would walk alongside, leading the horse. "It's 30 miles to Council Bluffs," Xavier explained as he helped Olivia onto Samson. "We'll take it in stages, find shelter each night. Should reach town in 3 days if the weather holds." The journey was arduous. Olivia tried to hide her pain, but Xavier saw how each jolt of the horse's movement made her clench her jaw. By midday, they'd covered only 5 miles, and he could see she was exhausted. "Let's rest here," he suggested when they reached a small stream. He helped Olivia down and settled her on a fallen log while he watered Samson. "I'm slowing you down," Olivia said, frustration evident in her voice. "You could have been in Council Bluffs by now if not for me." Xavier shrugged. "I'm in no hurry. My aunt and uncle aren't expecting me on any particular day. Still, I hate being a burden." "You're not," he said firmly. "Besides, I enjoy the company." Olivia smiled faintly, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, despite the bruising, and something stirred in Xavier's chest. They continued on after their rest, making another 5 miles before Xavier started looking for shelter as the sun began its descent. Fortune favored them when they came upon an abandoned way station, a relic from the days before the railroad, when stage coaches were the primary means of travel. The station was in better condition than the previous night's cabin, with 2 separate rooms, a proper fireplace, and even an old iron stove. Xavier set about making it habitable while Olivia rested on a bench near the entrance. "This is luxurious compared to last night," Xavier joked as he got a fire going. "I didn't mind last night," Olivia replied softly. "You saved my life." Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection neither had anticipated but both felt deeply. That evening, as they shared a meal of jerky and the last of the rabbit, Olivia asked about Xavier's family. "My father was a rancher in Texas," he explained. "Had a small spread, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Ma died when I was 10, typhoid took her. Pa never remarried, raised me on his own until a cattle rustler's bullet took him when I was 16. "I'm sorry," Olivia said, genuine sympathy in her voice. "That must have been hard." "It was," Xavier admitted, "but he taught me everything I needed to know before he passed. How to ride, rope, survive in the wild, how to be a man of honor." "He'd be proud of you," Olivia said, "for helping a stranger." Xavier's gaze softened. "What about you?" "Any family?" Olivia shook her head. "None that I know of. I was left on the steps of an orphanage as an infant. Sister Agnes, the woman who ran it, said there was a note pinned to my blanket with just my first name. She gave me Kensington when I needed a surname for school records." "That's a fine name," Xavier said. "Sounds distinguished." I've tried to live up to it, Olivia said with a sad smile. Not always successfully. We all stumble, Xavier replied. It's getting back up that counts. As darkness fell, they arranged their sleeping spaces on opposite sides of the main room. Xavier insisted Olivia take his coat again, despite her protests. I've got my blanket and the fire's warm enough, he assured her. Sleep well, Miss Kensington. Olivia, she corrected him softly. Please call me Olivia. Olivia, he repeated, liking the way it felt on his tongue. Good night. The second day of travel was easier than the first. Olivia's strength was returning, and the weather remained clear. They made better progress, covering nearly 12 miles before stopping for the night at another abandoned homestead. As Xavier prepared their evening meal, a stew made from a prairie hen he'd shot during their journey, Olivia watched him with growing admiration. He moved with easy confidence, competent at every task from hunting to cooking to tending his horse. Have you always traveled alone? She asked. Xavier shook his head. Not on cattle drives, those require a full crew, but between jobs, yes, it's usually just me and Samson. Doesn't it get lonely? He stirred the stew thoughtfully. Sometimes, but I've never been one for crowds. Find peace in the quiet, I suppose. I've never known much peace, Olivia admitted. The orphanage was always bustling and the saloons were even noisier. What made you choose that line of work? Xavier asked, then immediately added, I don't mean to pry or judge, just curious. It was the only job available to a woman with no references or family connections, Olivia explained. I started as a dishwasher, but the pay was better serving drinks, and despite what some might think, I never. She trailed off, a flush coloring her cheeks. You don't need to explain yourself to me, Xavier said gently. We all do what we must to survive. Olivia looked at him with wonder. You're different from other men I've known. Xavier smiled slightly. I'll take that as a compliment. That night, as a light snow began to fall outside, they sat closer to the fire than the night before. Something was changing between them, a trust building, perhaps even the first tentative roots of affection. Tell me about your dreams, Xavier said suddenly. If you could have any life, what would it be? Olivia considered the question, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. A small house, she said finally. Nothing grand. Just somewhere that's mine that no one can take away. Maybe a garden, books on the shelves. She paused. And children. I've always wanted children of my own to give them the love I never had. The vulnerability in her confession touched Xavier deeply. That sounds like a fine dream. What about you? She asked. What does Xavier Prescott want from life? He leaned back, stretching his long legs toward the fire. Land of my own, like my father had. A place to raise horses. I've always had a way with them. A good woman by my side. Their eyes met briefly before Xavier looked away. Simple things, I guess. The best dreams often are, Olivia said softly. The third day dawned bright and clear. Olivia insisted on walking part of the way, claiming her muscles were stiffening from too much sitting. Xavier agreed, but kept a watchful eye on her, ready to help her back onto Samson at the first sign of fatigue. We should reach Council Bluffs by nightfall, he informed her as they set out. My aunt and uncle live just outside town. Martha and Henry Callahan, good people. You'll like them. Do you think they'll mind you bringing a stranger? Olivia asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. Not once they hear how we met, Xavier assured her. Besides, their home is plenty big. They raised 5 children there, all grown and moved away now. Plenty of room for guests. As they walked side by side, Samson trailing behind them, Olivia found herself studying Xavier's profile again. In just 3 days, this man had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. He'd saved her life, yes, but it was more than gratitude she felt toward him. "What will you do in Council Bluffs?" Xavier asked, breaking into her thoughts. "Find work, I suppose," Olivia replied. "Start over, though I'm not sure who would hire me looking like this." She gestured to her face, where the bruises were turning from purple to a sickly yellow-green. "Bruises heal," Xavier said confidently. "And if my aunt can't help at the dress shop, there's a school that might need a helper. You seem educated." "The sisters made sure we could read and write," Olivia confirmed. "I was even allowed to teach the younger children sometimes. See, options already." Their conversation flowed easily as they continued their journey, sharing stories and observations. Xavier pointed out animal tracks in the snow, teaching Olivia to distinguish between deer, rabbit, and fox. She, in turn, told him about the books she'd read in the orphanage's small library, tales of adventure and far-off places. By mid-afternoon, they crested a hill and saw Council Bluffs in the distance, nestled along the Missouri River with smoke rising from dozens of chimneys. "There it is," Xavier said, a smile spreading across his face. "Journey's End." Olivia felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Relief that they'd made it safely, that she would soon have a proper roof over her head and perhaps a chance at that fresh start. But disappointment, too, that this time with Xavier was coming to an end. "You've been so kind," she said, turning to face him. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Xavier shook his head. "There's nothing to repay. I did what any decent man would do." "We both know that's not true," Olivia replied. "Most men would have ridden past," or she stopped, unable to voice the darker alternatives. "Well, I'm glad it was me who found you," Xavier said simply. The Callahan farm was a welcome sight as twilight settled over the land, a two-story farmhouse with a wide porch, a large barn, and several outbuildings, all well maintained. Warm light glowed from the windows, and smoke curled from the chimney. As they approached, the front door opened, and a plump woman in her 50s hurried out, followed by a tall, white-haired man. "Xavier," the woman called, her face alight with joy. "Henry, it's Xavier." Xavier grinned and quickened his pace, helping Olivia along as they crossed the final distance to the house. "Aunt Martha, Uncle Henry," he greeted them, accepting his aunt's enthusiastic embrace and his uncle's firm handshake. "It's good to see you both." "We were beginning to worry," Martha said, then noticed Olivia standing slightly behind Xavier. Her eyes widened at the sight of the young woman's bruised face. "Oh, my dear, what happened to you?" Xavier quickly explained their meeting and journey, downplaying his own role and emphasizing Olivia's strength in surviving her ordeal. By the time he finished, Martha had tears in her eyes and Henry's expression was grim. "You poor child," Martha said, gently taking Olivia's hand. "You're safe now. Come inside, both of you. Dinner's nearly ready, and you look half-starved." The Callahan home was warm and inviting, filled with handcrafted furniture and colorful quilts. Martha fussed over both Xavier and Olivia, insisting they sit by the fire while she finished preparing the meal. Henry took care of Samson, leading the tired horse to the barn where he would be groomed and fed. "Your family is lovely," Olivia whispered to Xavier as they warmed themselves by the hearth. "They're good people," he agreed. "I was fortunate to have them after my pa died. Spent a few summers here as a boy." Martha served a hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. It was the most delicious food Olivia had tasted in years, and despite her injuries, she ate heartily. After dinner, Martha showed Olivia to a small bedroom upstairs, one that had belonged to her youngest daughter. "You rest now," Martha said kindly. "Tomorrow, I'll draw you a proper bath, and we'll see about finding you some suitable clothing." Olivia thanked her profusely, overwhelmed by the Callahans' immediate acceptance and kindness. "No need for thanks," Martha assured her. Xavier has a good heart, just like his father did. If he brought you to us, then you're family now. That night, lying in the softest bed she'd ever known, Olivia reflected on the dramatic turn her life had taken. Just 4 days ago, she'd been certain she was going to die alone in the snow. Now she was safe, warm, and surrounded by kind people who asked nothing of her. And then there was Xavier. The thought of him brought a warmth to her chest that had nothing to do with the quilts covering her. In the span of a few days, he'd become important to her in ways she hadn't thought possible. But what did she mean to him? Was she merely an obligation, a good deed on his journey? The following days established a routine at the Callahan farm. Xavier helped Henry with the winter chores, repairing fences, tending to the livestock, and preparing for spring planting. Olivia, once her strength returned, assisted Martha around the house and in her small dress shop in town. True to her word, Martha had drawn Olivia a hot bath the day after their arrival and provided her with several dresses that had belonged to her daughters. With proper food and rest, Olivia's injuries began to heal. The swelling around her eye subsided and the bruises faded to yellow, then disappeared entirely. As her outward appearance improved, so too did her spirits. The nightmares of her attack grew less frequent, though they still came sometimes, leaving her gasping in the darkness. On those nights she would creep downstairs to the kitchen, where she often found Xavier also awake, nursing a cup of coffee. "Can't sleep?" he asked on one such night, 2 weeks after their arrival. Olivia shook her head. "The dreams still come." Xavier nodded in understanding and poured her a cup of coffee. They sat in comfortable silence at the kitchen table, the house quiet around them. "I've been thinking," Xavier said finally. "Uncle Henry's offered me a partnership in the farm. Says he's getting too old to manage it all, and since none of his children wanted to take it over." "That's wonderful news," Olivia said sincerely. "You'll be an excellent farmer." "It means I'll be staying in Council Bluffs," Xavier continued, watching her face carefully. "Putting down roots." Olivia's heart beat a little faster. "I'm glad. You deserve stability after all your wandering." "And what about you?" Xavier asked softly. "What are your plans now?" Olivia looked down into her coffee. "Your aunt has been very kind, offering me work at the dress shop. I've saved a little already. Perhaps in time, I could rent a small room in town." Xavier reached across the table, hesitantly covering her hand with his. It was the first time he'd touched her since those initial days when he'd cared for her injuries, and the contact sent a pleasant shiver up her arm. "I was hoping you might consider staying," he said. "Not just in Council Bluffs, but here with us." Olivia's breath caught. "What exactly are you asking, Xavier?" He met her gaze steadily. "I'm asking if you might give me a chance to court you properly, Olivia. These past weeks, getting to know you, I've never met anyone like you. Your strength, your kindness despite everything you've endured." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "I'm not what most would consider a suitable match. My background doesn't matter to me," Xavier interrupted. "I care about who you are, not where you came from or what circumstances forced you to do. People will talk." "Let them," he said with a shrug. "I've never much cared for gossip." Olivia studied his face, searching for any sign of doubt or deception, but found only sincerity. Slowly, she turned her hand beneath his, interlacing their fingers. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." Xavier's courtship was as straightforward and honorable as the man himself. In the mornings, he'd leave wildflowers by Olivia's bedroom door. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch swing, talking until the stars came out. On Sundays, they attended church together, Xavier proudly escorting Olivia down the aisle despite the curious stares and whispers. Martha watched their blossoming relationship with approval, often finding excuses to send them on errands together. Henry, more taciturn but equally supportive, taught Olivia to ride one of their gentler horses so she could accompany Xavier around the property. As winter gave way to spring, Olivia flourished. Her natural beauty, no longer marred by bruises, drew admiring glances in town. Her quick mind and nimble fingers made her an asset at the dress shop, where customers specifically requested her assistance with fittings and alterations. Xavier, too, seemed to thrive. The restlessness that had characterized his years as a cowboy faded as he invested himself in the Callahan farm. Under Henry's guidance, he learned the rhythms of planting and harvesting, the management of crops rather than cattle. One warm evening in late April, Xavier asked Olivia to accompany him on a ride to a special place he wanted to show her. They rode together to a gentle hillside overlooking the farm and the distant town, where a single oak tree provided shade. "Uncle Henry says this parcel belongs to the farm," Xavier explained as they dismounted. "I've been thinking it would be a fine place for a house." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "A house?" Xavier took her hands in his. "Olivia, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought something to my days that I never knew was missing." He paused, suddenly looking nervous. "I know it hasn't been long, and if you need more time, I understand. But I love you, and I can't imagine my future without you in it." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes as Xavier dropped to one knee before her. "Olivia Kensington, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Olivia couldn't speak past the emotion clogging her throat. This man who had found her broken and near death was now offering her everything she'd ever dreamed of: a home, a family, a love she could trust. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, Xavier, I'll marry you." His face split into a radiant smile as he rose and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. When they finally parted, both breathless, Xavier reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold ring with a modest pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "Pa gave it to me before he died, said I should save it for when I found a woman as special as she was." "It's beautiful," Olivia whispered, admiring how it caught the late afternoon light. "I'll cherish it always." They were married on a perfect day in June 1869, beneath the oak tree on the hillside where Xavier had proposed. Martha had sewn Olivia a wedding dress of ivory silk, and Henry had built a simple archway of twisted branches where the couple exchanged their vows before the minister, family, and a small gathering of friends from Council Bluffs. Xavier had spent the spring building their home on that same hillside, a sturdy two-bedroom house with wide windows to catch the morning light, and a porch where they could sit in the evenings. Martha and Henry gifted them with furniture, and the women from Martha's church filled their pantry with preserves and their linen closet with quilts and towels. On their wedding night, as they stood together in their new home, Xavier took Olivia's face gently between his hands. "From the moment I found you in that snowstorm," he said softly, "something told me you were meant to be part of my life. I didn't understand it then, but I do now." "What was it?" Olivia asked, her arms encircling his waist. "Faith," Xavier replied simply. "Faith that things happen for a reason. That even in our darkest moments, something good can be waiting on the other side." Olivia rose on her tiptoes to kiss him. "I never believed in such things before you. Now I can't imagine not believing." Life settled into a rhythm for the newlyweds. Xavier worked the farm alongside Henry, learning everything he could from the older man. Olivia continued at the dress shop, her reputation for fine needlework growing throughout the county. In the evenings, they'd sit on their porch, watching the sunset and sharing the details of their days. By the following spring, Olivia was with child. The news brought joy not only to Xavier and Olivia but to Martha and Henry as well, who would finally have a grandchild living nearby. "I hope she has your eyes," Xavier said one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over Olivia's growing belly. "She," Olivia laughed. "You seem quite certain it's a girl." "Just a feeling," he replied with a smile. "But boy or girl, it doesn't matter. Our child will be loved." "More than either of us was as children," Olivia agreed, a hint of sadness in her voice. "No orphanages or lonely ranches for this little one." Xavier kissed her forehead. "We're breaking the cycle, creating something new and better." In November of 1870, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and eyes as green as his mother's. They named him Thomas Henry Prescott, after Xavier's father and Uncle Henry. As Xavier held his son for the first time, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, Olivia watched him with a heart so full it felt it might burst. From the depths of despair, beaten and left for dead in a snowstorm, she had found not just survival but genuine happiness. A loving husband, a beautiful child, a home of her own, all the dreams she'd once thought impossible. "He's perfect," Xavier whispered, gently returning the sleeping infant to Olivia's arms. "He is," she agreed, "and he's ours." The years passed with a sweetness Olivia had never dared to hope for. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's quiet confidence and his mother's quick mind. When he was 3, he gained a sister, Sarah Martha Prescott, who had Xavier's blue eyes and a determination that impressed even her grandmother. The Prescott farm prospered under Xavier and Henry's joint management. They expanded their crops, added a small orchard, and began breeding horses, Xavier's true passion. Olivia's work at the dress shop evolved into a small business of her own when Martha decided to retire. With Xavier's encouragement, she opened Olivia's fine tailoring in a shop next to the general store. There were challenges, of course. Drought years when the crops struggled, a fire that damaged one of the barns, illnesses that swept through the family. But through it all, Xavier and Olivia faced each trial together, their bond only strengthening with time. On cold winter nights, Xavier would sometimes wake to find Olivia standing at the window, staring out at the snow-covered landscape. He knew she was remembering that terrible night when she'd nearly died alone in the wilderness. On those occasions, he would wrap his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder until she relaxed against him. "I still wonder sometimes," she confessed on one such night, their children sleeping soundly in the next room, "what would have happened if you hadn't found me." "But I did find you," Xavier reminded her gently, "and I always will." In the spring of 1878, 10 years after their fateful meeting, Xavier surprised Olivia with a special anniversary gift. He'd commissioned a local carpenter to craft a bookcase for their parlor and filled it with volumes of poetry, history, and fiction, the library she'd always dreamed of having. "You remembered," Olivia said, running her fingers along the spines of the books in wonder. "I remember everything you've ever told me," Xavier replied, "especially your dreams." That evening, as they sat together on the porch swing, Thomas and Sarah playing in the yard under the watchful eye of their grandparents, Olivia leaned her head against Xavier's shoulder. "When you found me that night," she said quietly, "I was certain I was dying. I'd given up hope." "I know," Xavier replied, taking her hand in his. "I could see it in your face even through the bruises. You didn't just warm my body back to life," Olivia continued. "You warmed my heart, my soul. You made me believe in goodness again." Xavier pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You did the same for me, you know. Before you, I was just drifting, moving from job to job, place to place. You gave me a reason to stop, to build something lasting." As twilight deepened around them, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The brutality that had nearly ended her life had instead led her to a love deeper and truer than she'd ever imagined possible. The scars, both physical and emotional, had faded with time, replaced by the joyful memories they'd created together. "Mama, Papa," Thomas called, running up to the porch with a fistful of wildflowers. "Look what I found for you." Olivia accepted the slightly crushed blooms with a smile. "They're beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you." Sarah toddled up behind her brother, not to be outdone, offering a smooth stone she'd discovered. "Pretty," she declared, placing it in her father's palm. Xavier examined the stone seriously before pocketing it. "A fine treasure indeed, little one. I'll keep it safe." As the children returned to their play, Xavier squeezed Olivia's hand. "We've built something good here, haven't we?" Olivia nodded, her heart full. "Better than anything I could have imagined." The years continued to unfold with new joys and challenges. Thomas grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's skill with horses and his mother's love of books. He eventually attended college in Omaha, returning to help expand the family business into horse breeding and training. Sarah, spirited and independent, became the first woman in Council Bluffs to open her own banking establishment, breaking barriers while maintaining her mother's grace and her father's integrity. In 1888, 20 years after Xavier had found Olivia in the snow, they welcomed their first grandchild, Thomas, and his wife Caroline's son, whom they named Xavier Henry Prescott. Holding the infant in her arms, Olivia marveled at how life had come full circle. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked Xavier as they sat together by the fire, the baby sleeping peacefully between them. "That night in the blizzard, did you ever think it would lead to all of this?" Xavier smiled, the lines around his eyes deeper now, but his gaze still as warm and steady as it had been the day they met. "I knew you were special from the moment I found you. But this," he gestured to their home, to the photographs of their children and the evidence of a life well lived that surrounded them. "This exceeds even my wildest hopes." As they grew older, Xavier and Olivia became respected elders in the community. Their farm, now primarily managed by Thomas while Xavier focused on horse breeding, was one of the most prosperous in the county. Olivia's tailoring business, passed on to a talented apprentice when her eyesight began to fail, continued to thrive under her occasional guidance. On winter evenings, Xavier would still build a fire in their hearth, and they would sit close together, sometimes talking, sometimes simply enjoying each other's presence. And though Olivia no longer feared the snow, Xavier never failed to wrap her in an extra blanket to check that she was warm enough. "Old habits," he'd say with a wink when she teased him about his fussing. "Good habits," she'd reply, kissing his weathered cheek. In the summer of 1908, 40 years after their first meeting, Xavier and Olivia celebrated their anniversary with a gathering that included their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The oak tree on the hillside, now majestic and sprawling, provided shade for the tables laden with food and the multiple generations of family. As the celebration wound down and the younger family members departed, Xavier took Olivia's hand and led her to the porch swing that had been their evening sanctuary for decades. 40 years, he mused, settling beside her. Seems both an eternity and the blink of an eye. "The best 40 years imaginable," Olivia replied, her voice softer with age but her eyes still bright with the same spirit that had helped her survive that long-ago night. "You know," Xavier said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, I've been thinking lately about how fortunate I was that Samson spooked at that shadow in the snow." Olivia laughed. "After all this time, you're telling me it was the horse that found me, not you." "Well, he did alert me," Xavier admitted with a chuckle, "but I was the one smart enough to stop and investigate." "Thank goodness for that," Olivia said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I would have missed all of this." As the sun set over their farm, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Xavier and Olivia sat contentedly together, their fingers intertwined as they had been for 40 years. From the depths of a frigid Nebraska winter had blossomed a love that had warmed them through all seasons of life, a love born of compassion and courage, nurtured by respect and devotion, and sustained by unwavering faith in each other. "I love you, Olivia Prescott," Xavier whispered, pressing a kiss to her silver-streaked hair. "More today than yesterday, but less than tomorrow." "And I love you, Xavier Prescott," she replied, squeezing his hand. "My rescuer, my partner, my heart." Together they watched darkness settle over the land that had been their home, secure in the knowledge that they had created a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the extraordinary journey that began on a snowy night in 1868, when a cowboy found a woman left for dead and warmed her back to life in more ways than one.